Yesterday, I was in the car with my mother, and she started talking about Charlie Hebdo. And I noticed that I got a little funny sensation in my belly. Um, I was thinking about racism, and I was thinking about Nigeria, and I was thinking about people here at home, um, mothers of children who've been killed, and the state of affairs of various things going on right here in our country. And luckily, I noticed that I had this funny sensation in my stomach, and I checked in and I thought, okay, how is this serving? So I didn't speak. I chose not to respond in some of my usual ways. I stopped for a moment and took a few breaths and I kept listening. I went back to listening. I noticed I had checked out because I had actually been thinking about all the stuff that I was worried about. My mother, what she doesn't understand about the world, blah, 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 right? That sound familiar? I bet none of you have these kinds of sensations when your mother's talking. Anyhow, um, this is important because that was a moment where I could have chosen to really shut down or to get into a fight or to basically perpetuate suffering in the world, which was exactly what she was talking about. And this also relates to my health, my personal health, in as much as one of the symptoms that I get if I don't pay very close attention to my own emotions and to my own sort of upsets about various things is that I will get some digestive upset. And if I let it go really far, maybe even a panic attack. Um, so I'm saying that to say that personal choice in moments is not a theoretical stress reduction technique. It's actually the core of not starting wars in the world. I could have started a war with my mother, or even just in myself. If I had chosen to keep that upset when I got out of the car from being with my mother, I could have gone in to my household where my children and my husband were and continued that upset and said, oh, blah, 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 my mom, whoever, whatever. But it wouldn't have been whatever. It would have been me sneezing all over them with the virus I just created from some sounds that my mother was making. She was just making noise. And here I was, making up all these stories, creating suffering in my own body, and furthermore, potentially bringing it in and infecting all of my children with that upset. So um, here's the real crucial part to remember about this. It's not just about me and whether or not I feel better if I have less stress or if I um, don't feel like fighting, right? If I go inside that house, say I don't stop my own suffering, so say I start a fight with my mother, even if I don't say anything to her, even if I just keep having this feeling in my stomach, racism is more important than Charlie Hebdo, right? Uh, I go inside my house, I complain to my husband. He gets some tension in his body. Uh, I keep complaining and I'm shouting at my children. And so my children end up with some tension in their bodies. And the next day, one of my children wakes up not feeling so good, but goes to school anyway, and they feel a little shouty. So then they shout at some other kid at school. That kid goes home, they're now shouty, they go home to their parent, they get shouty with their parents. What if that parent beats that child? What if that child beats their sibling? Really, physical fight. This happens. This is true in the world, right? This is what happened in Paris. This is what happened in Nigeria. This is what happens with police and young black men and women. So the question that I have is, how important is it that I stop creating that in every freaking moment of my life? And how simple is it for me to teach you how to do that too? Because this is a practice that I have, and I know how important it is. And in fact, it's the reason that I can do the work that I do, that I can be involved in active causes in my life um, without generating more pain in my own body. And it's because I am practiced at keeping this really clear, knowing the difference between anger and clarity. So it's not that I don't say to my mother something, it's that I definitely don't do it from the place of I've got some queasiness in my stomach because I'm angry, right? So I actually let that move into what is clarity? What actually what's missing that I can teach her or that I can ask her to listen to that will actually change the dynamic of that conversation. So this is step one. Sometimes we refer to it as upset is optional. So that was my experience of choosing not to be upset for the sake of those that I live with and for the sake of my capacity to be functional in the universe. If I had made myself sick, I would not have been able to get up and do any anti-racism work the next day. I would not have been able to get up and do any acupuncture work the next day. I may have just made myself very ill. Maybe not the next day, but over time, that builds up. So hopefully you'll tune in for the next version of the series. If any of you know this meditation app Headspace, my intent is to do 10 days of practices that you can take on in your life. So this one is very simple, and here's the way you practice this. Notice the first moment you start to get upset about something, or notice the first moment that your body starts to tense up. So the practice was in the car, listening to some sounds from my mother in the radio, and noticing I had a little reaction to it, right? First, I probably noticed the thought, but at that moment, instead of going into the thought, I actually checked in with my body. And I noticed that I had tension in my belly. And I took a moment, not actual time, it was not, didn't take a lot of time. I just checked in with my body and I said, okay, my belly is tight. Is this going to serve this conversation to move forward? Is this going to serve anybody? Does it help me do anything further in this conversation to have tightness in my belly? Can I let it go? So, step one, notice I've got an upset, whatever it is. Step two, find out where that upset is living in my body. Sometimes it's in my neck. Sometimes I get this in the back of my neck or in my shoulders. And we'll talk in another practice about how that leads to various other symptoms and illness. So check in with my body. And step three is, could I let that go? Even for 1 minute. Sometimes I have to think about, could I let it go for the sake of somebody else in my life? Will this serve me to further whatever the conversation is? The upset means something. I'm not trying to say that nothing has to happen, because usually if I'm upset, it's because there's something that's showing up missing for me in the world. So we'll presence that. That's another practice. But I cannot do it out of a place of upset because it doesn't come across cleanly. It's not effective, and doesn't actually serve anybody, including myself. So this is practice number one. Notice your body, notice your upset, notice where it is in your body, and see if you can let it go, just even for a moment, so that you don't create further suffering. I guarantee that the tightness in your body does not change the situation, and it doesn't make you any more effective in changing anything, even if there is something that needs to be changed about the situation. So practice number one, notice it, release tension in your own body, and noticing is really a good portion of what's needed. And there are more practices that we'll talk about in how to release that tension. If you go, I'm not sure, I don't know how, those are the practices that come next. So the first practice is just to notice. Notice your upset, notice it in your body, notice whether or not it actually helps you change something. Okay? So until next time, this is Jade and Wisdom Well Skills number 1.